All right, so there are a lot of questions, but before answering the question, I do want to make a clarification. When I say that race is a construct and that it is not real, that is not meant to deny the realness of race as a sociological phenomenon. That race as a sociological phenomenon is totally real. And what I mean by that is race is fundamentally the expression or this feeling of solidarity between people who have shared experiences vis-a-vis another group of people. Right? Like, so for instance, blackness in sociological sense is real, right? I'm a black person, right? And what in the sense that what black means for an American black person, I'm black, right? Because I share an experience with other people who have been given the particular designation that I've been given. And so that is real. So we don't want to deny that. It is a reality, and that's it. But in terms of in the other sense as understood and interpreted throughout history by these pseudoscientists, that's a different thing altogether. So I guess I'll begin with this. Well, this first question is that, do you think the issue of racism is going to die down over time, or is it inevitable? No, I don't believe it's inevitable. I just think it's just a matter of education. Educating ourselves about the history, where it came from, where our own perceptions, self-perceptions originate. That we educate ourselves in that way, then it's easier for us to overcome it. It's easier for us to cross boundaries when it comes to marriage and family life, things like that. Yes, it's we're hopeful people, but unfortunately, just that people don't ask those questions anymore. That we accept the construct without questioning where it originates. So there's another question saying, are you going to address ways to combat racism as manifested between ethnic groups in Islam? Race is a social construct, all white men with land. All right. So the issue of racism as manifested between ethnic groups in Islam, again, it's about education. I've spoken on this on a number of occasions, in particular when we talk about the differences or the divide between African American community and the Arab community in particular. I believe that the relationship between the Desi community, or the Indo-Pakistani community, and African Americans is much different and closer than it is with African Americans and Arabs. If anything, Arabs typically have a problem with everyone else. There's this tendency, and again, it is a history there. There's something, when you have accepted the idea of the mantle of leadership, that you're supposed to be in charge, then that sort of comes with the territory. It's a similar sort of reaction you may get, or used to get, at least in my experience, when I was growing up, from many whites as well, is that, they'll automatically take initiative, or they assume we're supposed to be in charge, so they'll just sort of take over. But that comes with, again, a history, a of experience that they do have. And it's not necessarily negative, but it is extremely important that we do struggle to learn other people's cultures. I think as Americans in general, white, black, Latino, whatever, that in general we have the tendency to just try to impose our own sort of cultural understanding on others, and have an aversion to other people's, and to consider what they do just crazy. When I studied in Morocco, one thing I learned there, and I was very glad that I was actually there by myself. There were no other Americans with me. And the reason I believe I feel glad is that I felt and I feel that the only way for you to truly be able to understand another culture is that you have to be willing to give up part of yourself, part of what you are. And that's kind of difficult when you have other people around you from your own culture, and you're going and living in another culture, and you're trying to understand people there. It's harder for you to give those things up because you're reinforcing one another's superiority complex over other people. So for instance, the thing like holding hands. Like Arabs like to hold hands, right? Men holding hands, right? When I first moved there, You know, that was a problem. You know, you're standing out in the street, and the guy just holds your hand. You know, and I'm like, whoa, what's happening here? And but it took some time for me. Just something as small as that. You know, it starts there, but then it goes into many different other directions. And I think that, you know, we have to be willing to give up part of what we are, who we are, in order for us to really do that. So sometimes about language, learning language. Did I do that? I didn't do that, did I? Okay. Some of it is about learning people's language as well. You know, many of us don't know Arabic, for instance, you know, or we don't know anything about, you know, the Pakistani history or know anything about their language, you know. But you don't necessarily need to know the language. I know that from experience. You know, you mix with the people, and then I think that that's one way to work on that and to hopefully overcome those issues. As practicing believers, Muslim and otherwise, what can we do to combat and institutionalize racism? How do answers to the question change when talking to a non-believer, atheist, agnostic? To me, is about history. Is about the history of the production of race. That if you understand it yourself and you have that conversation with other people, it starts there. And then you can, it doesn't matter what religious group they belong to. Like, for instance, I'll bring up this right now since it's a hot issue, that Muslims in the media. Like in America, the word Muslim is a racialized word. I don't like Islamophobia for more than one reason. One reason I don't like it is because I believe that the certain Muslims who utilize Islamophobia, they choose not to utilize the real words which is actually happening in America, which is racism. You know, and it's as if that some of those Muslims, they still want inclusion into whiteness, right, in America, as opposed to just say, hey, I don't have to be white or black. You know, I can be who I am. But I want inclusion into whiteness, and I don't want to, if I say racism, then that's like saying I'm with the black people against you. Right? So I'm not going to use that word, right? So it's Islamophobia, you know. And I'm saying that that's not the only reason why people use it. Some people, you know, they don't think like that. But I do believe that some Muslims who use the word, they do it for those reasons. But racism, it's racism because when you just look at just the sheer facts, you see, you know, of who's being attacked and who the attackers are, right? That if you ask the average white American, when you think Muslim, right, you get a picture in your head, don't you? Right? What do you see? Right? That those who are honest, they'll tell you. And I've had some white Americans tell me this. Now Muslims tell me this. I said, you think there's one of those people from over there, right? From those countries, right? Those alien people, right? Those brown people, those olive-skinned people, that's Muslim. So Muslim is a racialized term, right? So if Muslim is a racialized term and they're reacting against Muslims, right, and they're attacking Muslims, then it's racism, right? I'm attacking you not because of your religion per se. I'm attacking you because I'm afraid of people like you, who look like you. I don't understand you. I'm not familiar with you and your culture. You understand? So in attacking institutionalized racism, you can't do it if you're not willing to be courageous enough to challenge the constructs, to mention the history, right? To highlight these different things. We shouldn't always have to be on the defensive. We should always be on the defensive. Like every time something happens, you know, oh, where are the Muslims? They're not apologizing. You know, every single day, Muslims should be apologizing every time another Muslim does something. And we stand up, we do it. Like, whatever. I'm not even going to mention the word. You put in there whatever word you want. But we do it all the time. We just apology after apology. Why do I have to apologize for someone? I don't know that. Listen, I never met the dude. I never seen him before. I mean, why I got to apologize for him? I mean, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Right? I don't. But it's always apology, condemnation. And then even, and I will say that, yes, ISIS is somewhat of a different thing in that we do have to make it clear to the Muslim youth not non-Muslim people, to Muslim youth that that is not Islam. Right? So it's about where we direct our apologies, where we direct our condemnations. I'm concerned about the Muslim youth becoming radicalized, right? From here, from England, that's what I'm concerned with. So they need to understand. So we do need to do a condemnation. I'm not going to do a condemnation so non-Muslims can be like, hey, look, Muslim. No, I'm not going to do that. Because I don't believe that most of them have any moral high ground that they can stand on to try to demand from me, that I repudiate injustice. No, who are you to tell me to repudiate injustice, right? And so yeah. And those people who are mature people won't demand an apology from you anyway. Mature people are the ones who deserve some explanation, but also mature people are the ones who won't demand an explanation from you because they'll say, hey, well, you didn't do it. Why, Now, if a person is telling me that I have to apologize for what you did, then the person's not mature. And to me, you don't deserve an apology. You don't deserve an apology. That's my position. I know everybody doesn't agree with that, but that's my position on the issue. And so we have to be somewhat courageous when it comes to that. So we're going to attack institutional racism. We have to be willing to call things as they are, call things out as they are. Could you please address the problem of racism in the masjid, especially in the masjid where there's an Arab presence? So I knew people were going to start jumping on the Arabs, right? Again, when people don't understand one another, when people are not familiar with one another in their culture, their thinking, their way of living, then there's going to be some sense of aversion. It's always going to be that way, you see. Especially if you have been demonized in the media. I mean, you have Africans coming here who are afraid of black people in America, black Americans. Because we're demonized in Africa. So when they come to America, it's like, oh man. Remember that movie, that documentary we saw? Across the street. So if you've been demonized, people have been demonized, you've been demonized in other people's eyes, then they're not going to right away sort of just react very positively towards you. But then the other part of it too is this, is that we have to choose those people we believe we have to choose those people whose love we believe we deserve. Does that make any sense? Does that make any sense? Some of you make sense to you. What I mean by that is that why am I always harping on the Arabs this, the Arabs that, the Arabs this, right? That and it's kind of like the old thing, the white man did this, white man did that. We made white man into a God. We talked about the white man being the devil so much we made him into God, right? And so it's like, okay, the Arabs, why didn't the Arabs do this? Why don't the Arabs do that? It's like, well, why don't you just accept, hey, well, Arabs are people. Some of them are good people. Some of them are not so nice people. There may be reasons why they react that way to you. I mean, choose a different crowd. Choose a different group of people who are more welcoming to you. But you remain welcoming to others, right? Hopefully, Allah will guide those people and make them better as well. You see, so it's about like where our hearts are, So it's like, I want your validation, and it's an example I've given as well. Like for instance, you remember like the cartoons, right? Against the Prophet, right? Right? The cartoons, right? There was the big blow up about the cartoons, about the films as well, in Benghazi, all that stuff, right? Now, I believe that the reason that you got the type of reaction from Muslims in those parts of the world, very negative reaction, burning American flags, and people are going crazy, sometimes hurting people as well. I'm honoring, protecting the Prophet's honor. By killing somebody, by hurting somebody, I don't think, that doesn't sound like my Prophet. But the reason they reacted that way was because the people who were attacking them and attacking the Prophet were people who they ultimately want validation from. Think about it like this. What if people in Zaire did that, or people in Ethiopia did that, do you think that the Muslims would have reacted the same way? I mean, do you believe that you really would have, people really would have been outraged? Oh my God, you're attacking the Prophet, you know, right? Okay, we're going to burn American flags. We're going to burn the Ethiopian flag, right? I don't believe personally that that would be the same reaction. Why? Because again, we're dealing with, these are the people we want to love us. We want them to love us. We don't care about those. We want them to love us. But if they are hating us, oh, that hurts. Right? You know, you love a woman, you know, she'll love you back, right? It's like, oh man, I love you. Get out of my face. Right? It hurts. Right? And it's the same thing. At least that's the way I see it. How much more time we have? Okay, inshallah. You have more time? So this is a statement. I believe this issue is a part of a big phenomenon known as divide and conquer. How do you distinguish between racism, prejudice, and ethnocentrism? Indeed, yeah, but that's fundamentally the whole system is. You know, it's the Muslim problems. You know, they appeal to your weakness. You know, they put it in your head, make you think that you're this different from this person so much that you have to save yourself from them, right? And they run away with all the money. They're giving all these bailouts to, you know, to Wall Street, right? You know, they're not prosecuting any of these people. The same people who caused the crash, they're put into government positions, you know, to fix it. So how are you going to fix it? He broke it, right? So, I mean, you have and nobody's been prosecuted, right? That Wall Street gets bailed out, Main Street didn't get bailed out, right? So all these, this race in particular is one of those, like, why? I mean, it's you know, it's manipulation. And we have to become smarter. We have to become smarter than that. And so distinguishing between racism, prejudice, and ethnocentrism. So again, for me, racism is systemic. Racism, like, listen, if white people get word, and this is what happened in American history after emancipation, after Civil War, if white people are being given loans, bank loans to get housing, right, and black people are not, they're getting loans to go to get higher education, and black people are not getting them. They're being allowed to get certain jobs and black people can't get those jobs, right? Then that's a racist system. That's fundamentally a racist system. You know, and also, I mean, when we look at our system today, when we start talking about the idea of white supremacy, that the skinheads kind of like, sort of like these scapegoats, that we still live in a white supremacist system. It is still a white supremacist system. You know, and so a few tokens that are, you know, that we see pop up from time to time, you know, that's just to silence people. So people say, you know, well, we got a black president, right? Yeah, you got a black president, you know, but how much, you know, but how many, look at the Congress, right? When I look at the Congress, I see, look at the makeup of the Congress, you know, the Senate and the House of Representatives. You know, when I look at the military command, you know, who's in no positions? And the economic sector, who's in charge? Right, in education, you look at the professors, look at their faces, look what they look like, right? Yeah, I mean, we don't have an egalitarian system. They say just pull yourself up your bootstraps and just, you know, just work harder. You can make it. No, you know. And when you find law enforcement, right, more white people getting high than black people, but all the police are in our neighborhoods arresting us for possession. Right? So it's like, well, I mean, what's happening there? It's a racist system, it's a white supremacist system. And that doesn't mean that white people should feel guilty. And, you know, I kind of know some people are like, you guilty and apologize for it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, perhaps I can understand if there's some guilt there. Yeah, because like you're not doing it per se, but it's like if you get yourself in a position to do something about it, then it's like, yeah, there's a greater burden, right? Because the system does privilege you more than anyone else. So that would be racism. I mean, prejudice is, you know, everybody's prejudiced. I mean, when people get married, they don't say, well, you want a certain type of person. So, you know, I mean, I want to look like this. Yeah, hey, you know, everybody's prejudiced. I don't like pizza, but I like hamburgers. You understand? Everybody's prejudiced on some level. You have your preferences, you see. You know, but it's just, of course, when prejudice becomes derogatory, it becomes oppressive, you know, and especially if when you have power, when power is involved, then we have racism. Ethnocentrism is just basically, listen, you know, I'm going with what I'm familiar with. I like this kind, I'm familiar with this kind, I want this, I prefer this kind. There's nothing racist about that. Because, you know, the Indian guy, the Indian sister came up to him, and he had a choice between the Indian sister and the Indonesian sister. You know, he chose the Indian sister. That's not racist. It's like, hey, well, it's ethnocentrism. I prefer that. There are a lot of questions up here, but, oh, now this one, I think that's probably the same question. Now this question, what are your thoughts that the Prophet was dark-skinned, and how do the Arabs respond to this? Now I don't believe the Prophet was dark-skinned. I don't believe that. However, to describe the Prophet as white is wrong. You can't describe the Prophet as black either. Describe the Prophet as black is wrong. Describe him as white is wrong. Because both of those words are loaded. They have too much baggage with them, right? The Prophet was not a European, right? He didn't even come close to looking like a European, right? But he also wasn't an African, right? And so there are many different narrations. Like, of course, the more mainstream books on the description of the Prophet, peace be upon him, describe him as being a person of lighter skin. Some have actually even described him as white. But there are many different hadiths. And Imam al-Tirmidhi, in his collection, he has a hadith from Anas bin Malik. It says the Prophet kana asmar alone, that he was brown. Right? That he was brown. And so what happens is that when you take in the different narrations, some people say, well, these are better than those, right? Something happened. I prefer these over those. And so basically, Imam al-Bayhaqi and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, both of them tried to reconcile between the various narrations. And so Ibn Hajar, he says that what it meant was that the Prophet, if you happen to see him at night, in the night, right, then he might look like he was white because there's no sun. But in the daytime, because he did have somewhat of some color in his skin, right? But the sun was shining on him, he looked brownish, right? So, because he was a lighter skinned Arab, you see, but he wasn't white. You know, so I think it's a big mistake to describe the Prophet as white or black, that we should stop doing that. The Prophet was not white. When you hear a person say that, you check them. You know, it's like, no, white is a very problematic word. It has a particular connotation in English. It's not a good translation, even if abyad, you know, means white. And then when we take into consideration as well the very fact that I mentioned earlier, that the linguists, when they say when someone is called white or said to be abyad by the Arabs, it is a reference to their character. It's a description of their character. So there's a possibility that is what actually was a reference to, when in fact the Arabs themselves didn't refer to themselves as abyad, you know, as white. You know, they referred to themselves as Arabs, right? Or they might describe themselves as Adam or Asmar or Adham or Adlam. There are many different words they would utilize, but they all are levels, shades of color. You know, this was the overwhelming majority of the Arabs from the prophetic era. Perhaps one more question, I'll answer that. Does racism, well, maybe two. Does racism mean love for your own people? No. Love your own people is, there's nothing wrong with that. تَعَلَّمُوا مِنْ أَنْسَابِكُمْ مَا تَصِلُونَ بِهِ أَرْحَامَكُمْ. You know, learn enough about your lineage to the extent that you're able to maintain ties of kinship. The Prophet said that. You know, learn about your lineages, learn about your heritage, so that you can maintain ties of kinship. You see, that is an extremely important thing in Islam. And then we call the maqasid. From the maqasid of Sharia is hifz al-nasab, according to hifz al-nasab, the protection of lineage or protection of progeny. That is an important element of Islamic legal thought. And then a lot of the questions are the same. Not just one last one. Just want to pick a good one. Okay, I talk about white supremacy. Question. I'll answer that in this personal question. Okay, so I'll just answer this last one here. What are some pros and cons of denouncing being referred to being labeled black or African American, white or Caucasian, rather just American? All right, so what are some of the pros and cons of objecting to being labeled black, African American, white, Caucasian, as opposed to just American? All right. So, I mean, I'm quite sure you can list some pros and cons to that, but America is supposed to be a melting pot. Supposed to be, right? Right. You know. So if I'm just an American. Oh yeah. Prove it. I mean, how do you know? This is American. Now we know that the prototypical American is the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon Protestant at that, right? You know, they get WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, prototypical American. But all the rest of us, you know, there was a movie called The Good Shepherd. Y'all saw that one? The CIA when it was first was formed, and so there's one scene in the movie where the guy, I forget his name, he was the first head of the CIA. He visited the mafia boss, the Italian, and so he's at his house, and you know, so the Don, he says to him, well, he said, listen, you know, we're Italians, you know, we got our food, we got our church, you know, even, you know, and he said, these people got this because even the blacks, they got their music. He said, what do you people got? So he turns to him and he says, we got the United States of America, and the rest of you are just visiting. But that's the reality. I mean, it's to say it in the movie, but that is the reality of, you know, at least the mentality of people on that level, you see. You know, so American, we're all hyphenated Americans, you see. You know, prototypical, when we say American, we automatically think white guy. It's like you go to the Muslim world, you say, my name's Ameriki. You say, my name, that Asal. They say, oh, I say, what's she originally from? You know, no, it's a white guy. He's like, where are you American? Oh, because that's, we acknowledge it, you know, subtly we acknowledge it, but, and I do want to make a final clarification about the word Caucasian before we go. The word Caucasian was introduced by Johann Blumenbach, the German. And what he meant by it was not Europeans only. What he meant by Caucasian were people of Europe, Eastern Asia, but we can talk about the Persians, right? And North Africa. So all those people are Caucasians. So just be aware of that when you use that term, and you only use it to refer to people from Europe, just like when you use Semitic and you only think of people who are Jews, you know, that there is, again, you got to straighten it out up here. And we have to sort of talk about it publicly in order that people challenge all of these sort of these frames of thinking, these frames of classification, this sort of taxonomy, you call it, you know, and it's because of that, because we don't challenge them, is what has us literally sort of at one another's throats at times, you see. You know, so that if an African doesn't seem to be as much in solidarity with you and your African American movement, doesn't mean that he's an Uncle Tom. He just had a different experience of blackness, right? His experience of blackness is not yours, right? Or like somebody coming from Yugoslavia, right? Coming here to, you know, and they're dealing with, say an Irishman. right? And the Irishmen say, hey, we're being oppressed. We were oppressed in America, you know, and these guys are trying to still do it. And they say, well, if Yugoslavia. I mean, they're two different experiences, you know. And so although we may imagine ourselves at times as being an extremely homogenous people, a single unit, right, who originate from that little village in Africa, right, when the grandmom and the granddad comes from, you know, that the reality is something different. The reality is something different. And so just being aware that race has been constructed, right, and racism, right, once race is constructed, then we could create racism, you see, you know. So challenge yourselves, challenge your cognitive self-perceptions, right? Challenge them, you know, and I think that that's a start. And talk about them, and hopefully that will help us to overcome these type of issues moving forward. So I thank you for bearing with me patiently, and hope to see you again soon. Assalamu alaikum.